Before you had a name, you existed. Before your mother knew your face, something about you was already real. This is not a metaphor. This is a question scientists, philosophers, and mystics have circled for centuries, and none of them fully agree on the answer. So where were you? Start with the obvious answer. You did not exist. There was no you, no awareness, no point of view, just absence. This is the materialist position, and it is the one most of us were quietly taught to accept without ever examining it. But sit with it for a moment. Can you actually imagine non-existence? Not darkness, not sleep, not silence. Those are all experiences. Non-existence has no experience attached to it at all. Try to picture it, and your mind quietly substitutes something else, because the mind cannot represent its own absence. That gap, the place where imagination fails, is where the real question lives. The Greek philosopher Plato did not think you came from nothing. In his dialogue, Meno, he proposed that the soul existed before birth and already possessed certain knowledge. Knowledge the body simply needed to recall. He called this an amnesis, or unforgetting. Children sometimes solve problems they were never taught, and Plato took this as evidence the soul was remembering rather than learning for the first time. Modern psychology takes a very different approach, but lands somewhere oddly close. Dr. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, spent decades studying what he called the collective unconscious. He noticed that patients from completely different cultures, who had never read the same books or shared the same religion, would describe nearly identical symbols in their dreams. A snake, a great flood, a wise old man. Jung concluded that something deeper than personal memory was being inherited. Not facts, patterns. As if the architecture of the mind existed before the individual mind did. So, which is it? Were you nothing, or were you something already in motion? Here is where it gets stranger. Quantum physics, of all places, has reopened a door that philosophy left ajar. The physicist Erwin Schrödinger, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, wrote near the end of his life that consciousness might not be something the brain produces, but something the brain receives, like a radio receiving a signal it did not create. He was not being poetic. He meant it as a serious hypothesis about the nature of awareness itself. Think about what that would mean. If consciousness is received rather than generated, then the brain is not a factory manufacturing your mind from nothing. It is closer to an antenna, tuning into something that already exists. The way a radio does not create the music, it only makes the music audible in this room, in this moment. If that is true, your birth was not the beginning of you. It was the moment the antenna switched on. This idea is ancient, far older than quantum physics. In the Hindu tradition, the soul, or Atman, is described as eternal, moving through countless bodies the way a person changes clothes. The Bhagavad Gita states this directly. The soul is never born and never dies. It simply takes on form, wears it out, and takes on form again. Death, in this framework, is not an ending. It is a change of clothing. In many West African spiritual traditions, particularly among the Yoruba people, a child is sometimes believed to be a returning ancestor. Elders will look at a newborn's face, its gestures, even its temperament, searching for signs of which relative has come back. This is not regarded as superstition by the people who practice it. It is regarded as observation, a way of recognizing a pattern that has reappeared. Notice something. Across cultures that never had contact with each other, across thousands of years, the same intuition keeps resurfacing. You were here before, not as nothing, as something, but let's not romanticize this too quickly. There is a real argument on the other side, and it deserves respect. Neuroscientists like Dr. Christoph Koch have spent careers studying what is called the neural correlates of consciousness, the specific brain activity that lines up with subjective experience. Everything we can measure suggests consciousness depends entirely on a functioning brain. No brain, no measurable awareness. By this view, asking where you were before birth is like asking where the flame was before the match was struck. The flame did not exist somewhere else, waiting. It simply had not happened yet. This is a serious position. It is not closed-minded, it is careful. And it forces a real question back onto the table. Is awareness something that exists only when produced, like fire? Or is it something that exists everywhere, like a field, becoming locally visible only when the right conditions allow it? You may not be able to answer this with certainty. Almost no one can. But notice what happens when you actually consider both possibilities seriously, instead of defaulting to whichever one feels safer. If you were nothing before birth, then this life is a singular, almost impossible event. One chance, no rehearsal, no equivalent before or after. That should not make you feel small. It should make you feel astonished that you are here at all, against odds too enormous to calculate. If instead, you were something before birth, some thread of awareness reorganizing itself into a new shape, then this life is not your only appearance. It is a chapter, which means the people you love, the moments that wound you, the mistakes you cannot undo, none of them are final in the way fear tells you they are. Both possibilities point toward the same practical truth. You are here now. That part is not in question. The body you are sitting in, the breath moving through you as you listen to this, that is undeniable, regardless of which philosophy turns out to be correct. So why does this question matter if it cannot be settled? Because the way you answer it, even silently, even without realizing you have answered it, shapes how you treat the time you have. People who believe they are a brief accident of chemistry often respond in one of two ways. Either they grasp at everything, trying to extract maximum experience before the lights go out, or they go numb, deciding nothing really matters, since it all ends in the same place. People who believe something continues, whether through soul, pattern, or simple physical recycling of energy and matter, tend to relate to their life as a responsibility rather than a countdown. Not because they are certain, because the question itself reorders their priorities. You do not need to resolve the metaphysics to notice this effect in yourself. Ask which answer makes you live more carefully, more attentively, more honestly. That answer is worth taking seriously, whether or not it is provable. There is a third option too, one that gets less attention because it is harder to dramatize. Maybe the question itself contains a hidden assumption that does not hold up. We ask where you were before birth, as if you are a fixed, separate thing that needed a location, the way a chair needs a room to sit in. But what if you are not a thing at all? What if you are closer to a process, like a wave on the ocean? Before the wave rose, was it nowhere? Or was it simply the ocean, not yet shaped into that particular curve and crest? The wave does not come from somewhere else and arrive in the ocean. It is the ocean, temporarily organized into a form with edges, a form that will eventually flatten back into the larger body it never actually left. If you are something like that wave, then the question, where were you before you were born, quietly transforms. It is not asking about a place, it is asking about a shape, and the answer becomes almost simple. You were the same substance you are now, undifferentiated, unshaped, not yet curved into this particular rising moment called your life. That does not make the mystery disappear. If anything, it deepens it. Because now the real question is not where consciousness goes, but what it actually is underneath all its temporary shapes. Neuroscience has not answered that. Philosophy has not answered that. Quantum physicists who study it most carefully tend to admit, with real humility, that they do not know either. So here is what is true, regardless of which framework eventually turns out to be correct. You exist now. That existing took something, whether you call it chance, soul, pattern, or wave. And it will not last in this exact form forever. Knowing that should not frighten you into shrinking. It should focus you. The way knowing a film has a runtime makes you watch more closely instead of less. You were asked at the start of this, where you were before you were born. Maybe the better question, the one actually worth carrying with you, is this. Now that you are here, in this shape, in this exact moment of awareness reading these words, what will you do with having arrived at all?